here. Setting the new bar for the background. Mr. Cole, what's up, dude?
Hey man, how's it going?
It's going well. Second Cole on the show. I guess we'll put up a poll on Instagram who had the better background. Thank you.
No, I know I feel like I'm always like the second fiddle Cole here. I don't know, man. Like DIY is always kind of showing me up. Now when I call Seven Enterprise, I have to say this is Cole from Colorado. I have to like specify which Cole it is, man. So if Cole, if you're watching, thanks, man. I appreciate it, buddy.
Cole from Colorado. All right. CC.
Yeah.
Well, I think they'll get to know you too. You probably have been getting a lot of parts for the Mini.
Yeah, no, no. Yeah, I'm always bugging Jack over at Seven. So
That's awesome. Thanks for being on, man. I really, really appreciate this. I've been kind of bugging you for the last few months now because I don't know, we've been chit chatting over Instagram for a while now, and Instagram has turned into my like new just messaging platform. I like always just go on to just hang out with people, and obviously my feed is 99% Mini. But I feel like I'm in the messaging platform of Instagram all the time. I'm just new friends that I've met through the community, so it's been fun. But your you don't seem to post too much actually on your Instagram, but your story always catches my eye, and I was like, damn, he's building this race mini. Let's talk about this.
yeah, no, for sure. I know. Like I've kind of noticed that I kind of save like posting on Instagram, like on like the main page for kind of milestones in the
Yeah.
build, and then the day-to-day stuff it kind of goes in the stories. So if anybody wants to catch up on my race car build, you'll have to just watch the stories there. It's 850 RS is the story you'll want to see.
Yeah, super cool. We'll obviously dive into this, but again, thank you for being on. And I'm excited about this one because as I started this podcast, I realized like I really want to start like finding these cool race car builds because I'm selfish and I want to hear about that more. But no offense to everyone
Yeah,
else, I,
man.
I like all the stories, but the race cars are cool, right?
Yeah.
Let's jump in. I wanna learn a little bit more because, like I said, usually when I'm researching this, either I know the person a little bit um, outside of Instagram, or their Instagram has a bunch of stuff, and I'm interested to find out about how you got into minis. Is it something that you liked as a kid? Did you kind of fall into it? It looks like maybe one thing I saw was you had a black mini at one point.
Yeah, yeah. No, so I mean, my mini story kind of goes way back to junior high. Like junior high, like seventh grade, we were kind of riding around, me and my dad, and I saw a classic mini for the first time ever, and I thought it was like the coolest thing. And at the time, my brother was just starting to drive, and he had a Volkswagen Beetle, and so like I had to find like my car, right? And I couldn't be like my brother, so I was like, well, mini, that's my thing. And I had to do a website for one of my computer classes in junior high. So I made a website about minis, and like ever since then, it's just been all mini for me. Um, and it took a while to actually get one, right? Like that's how it goes. You start liking them and seeing them, and it wasn't till like after college I had my first like kind of real job where I was making some money,
Mm-hmm.
and me and a friend were actually driving down the interstate, and I saw a classic mini, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I still need to get one of these. So like that night I went home, got on eBay and bought a mini. Like
Dang,
did
that night.
zero research on what I should have like actually been looking for.
Of
Um,
course. Of
found
course.
a yeah, found a like a what looked like a really clean 75, mini up in Washington. And in the listing, it was listed as a great daily driver, right? As they always are.
Wow. Nice.
So bought it, and like I was communicating with the guy, and I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna fly out and drive it home from Washington." And he's like, "Ooh, you might want to bring a trailer." That should have been my like first indication, right? Like
Ooh.
So I show up to get this Mini, and my dad went with me. So we took his truck, pulled a little trailer, showed up, and the guy hands me a box of parts and says, "Yeah, it was a great daily driver when I parked it and started taking it apart." And I'm like, "Oh, dude." So the car didn't
Wow.
run, and like, I mean, I got it cheap, right? Like, so this was 2006 when I
Uh-huh.
got my first Mini, so you could still pick up a decent Mini for like 4 grand. So I
Right.
paid like 4 grand for this car, and it cost me like almost $1,000 to go get it, right? With like hotel rooms, like the gas driving from, Colorado.
Right.
Um, so I get there and I'm like, well, do I want to just ask for my money back? Or do I just take this like box of parts home and figure it out? And it's like, well, I've already spent like a grand getting it, so I might as well just like take it home and figure this out. So yeah, that was kind of my first foray into the Mini ownership, was a parts box and a super rusty shell.
This was that black mini that I saw on your Instagram.
So it's a really dark green.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. And I mean,
Oh, I see.
obviously,
I
like
see. Yeah.
Instagram wasn't a thing back then, so
Right. Right.
yeah.
Right.
So there's not too many photos of it on my Instagram, but yeah,
Oh, that's
that
funny.
was the first one. Yeah,
Dang. So you were in Colorado still at that time.
yeah, yep,
That's great. I love that story. That's funny. So I want to circle back here. You, um, you said you made a website about Mini in like what your multimedia class in or in high school.
yeah, yeah. It was in junior high as a seventh grader. Yep.
You know what? That's the funniest thing ever because literally when you said that, I was like, "Holy shit! I did the same thing." It's like build it. It was like it
Yeah.
had like the mini, and it like came on the screen, and it had like burnout marks, like because it was also like the time of, at least when I was doing it was like Fast and the Furious. So I think it had the Fast and the Furious song with the classic mini doing a
Oh, that's
burnout on the
awesome.
screen. Oh man, so good, so good. So how long did you have that mini for?
Oh man. Um, I had it for a couple years, probably 2 or 3 years, and I mean, I grew up on a farm in Nebraska, so like my entire childhood, we were always like pulling old trucks out of the field, fix them up, make them run, use them as daily drivers, kind of thing. So I was used to kind of like working on shitty old vehicles, really. Um, so yeah, I just kind of like got it running, played around with it for a while. I was actually driving like back home, back to Nebraska in the thing, and ended up blowing the motor. And like at that time, I kind of knew minis, but not well enough. It was just a blown head gasket. I totally could have like fixed it and made it work again, but I ended up selling it for a grand to a buddy.
Oh,
Um, yeah, so it was kind of bittersweet. Like it was tough to see that one go, but I knew I was going to buy another one, so I quickly got on eBay, bought another one. Um, and I felt really bad about selling that car because the guy I sold it to, and I told him, I was like, it's not great. The motor's done, like it needs a new motor and it needs some work. He took it home and was going to do a restoration on it, and he lived in Oklahoma, so
uh-huh.
he hauled it back to Oklahoma and started taking it apart. And he's like, "Dude, this thing is so rusty." I'm like, "Dude, I don't know. Like, I knew it was rusty, but I didn't know how bad." He's like, "Yeah, the rear subframe was like holding on by like one bolt." I was like, "Yeah, that sounds about right, like a classic
Oof,
mini style."
oof, yeah.
But yeah, so I probably dodged a bullet selling that one, really.
Well, what did
But
you have
yeah,
to
so
do
then
to get it
yeah.
running? Well, like when you
Oh
first
man,
bought it.
like yeah, when I first bought it. So really, it was just kind of like normal tune-up stuff, right? Like new spark plugs, wires, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The carburetor was the big thing though. It needed a full carb rebuild, which wasn't too bad, but like I just had my Haynes manual.
Right,
This was before like the YouTube videos were a big thing.
right.
So yeah, I just had the Haynes manual, just learned how to work on it through that and rebuilt the carb. It's kind of funny. I'd been talking to different parts companies and stuff like that, but I actually called Graham out at Heritage Garage
Yeah.
and was kind of telling him what I was working on. And I told him that I wanted to do a full restoration. And he's actually the one who was like, dude, do not restore that car. He's like, it's not worth it. He's like, find one somebody else has already restored and just buy that. He's
Yeah.
like, it's not worth it. And I was like, okay.
Wow, that's
So that was
funny.
probably some good advice I got from him.
Seriously, seriously. There's some that are worth it and some that just put it together and
Yeah.
drive it and have fun, right?
Exactly. Yep.
So the second one that you ended up buying isn't your current one. How many minis have you had?
No. So I've had seven classics and two of
Dang.
the BMWs. Yeah. Um, the second one was actually one that I owned the longest, and you'll see photos of that one on my Instagram. It's the green van with the yellow checkerboard roof.
Okay.
Um, yeah, yeah. Bought that up in Spokane, Washington. Um, and that, I mean, that was a great car. Again,
Why are you
I bought
finding
it,
all
showed
these
up,
minis in Washington?
dude. Like most of my minis have come from Washington for some reason. I don't know. It's
Weird.
weird. Um, yeah, so that one was awesome. And I showed up and it ran. Like that was the coolest thing. Like it actually ran. Um, and the guy I bought it from, John Lorraine, he was a like PDR guy. Like so he'd actually been using this van as his like little PDR like runabout. Like so he'd run out and do like PDR work out
Right.
of this like classic mini van. So I thought that was super cool.
Yeah, that's like one of my bucket list cars is to have like a the van as like a work vehicle. I mean, I don't do any work that I would need it for, but I would definitely label it as some sort of parts hauler or something. Yeah, that one's
Yeah,
cool. It's
no,
like
for sure.
like that bright green with like kind of like a soft yellow middle part and then the checkered roof. I like that one a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah. No,
Wow.
it was super cool. And that one came from New Zealand. So, um, kind of a cool history behind that one, at least what I was told. The rear windows were cut out, like, or like the rear panels were cut out and put windows in.
Hmm.
And essentially what they'd do is they'd use that as like the family runabout, but they wouldn't have to pay as much tax because they bought it as a commercial vehicle. So they didn't have to pay as much
Oh,
tax. And then they'd cut out the side windows and it came with the fold up seat option in the back. So
right.
it had the rear seat in the commercial van.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting. See, the cars have like crazy stories with like who would have thought of that? I mean,
Yeah, yeah. No, so that one was super cool, and I had that one for like 10 years. That one was like one of my favorites. When I bought it, it had a 998. I had a buddy who gave me a 1275 that needed a rebuild, but it came with like twin carbs and everything. So I rebuilt that on my kitchen table. This was back when I was single, obviously, but rebuilt it on my kitchen table. Threw it in there and just had a blast with it.
wow, that's awesome. Super fun. I mean, I commend people like you that have had multiple minis and still don't own them all. That's that's probably the hard part, right? I mean, outside of the one that you're like, you were younger, it blew up or whatever, and you're like, all right, I just need out. I've been there. It's like I'm gonna set this
Yeah,
on
yeah.
fire. Someone take it.
Oh man, no. I mean, classic like always selling a project to fund the next project kind of thing. Like I wish I had them all still, but it's been good though. Like I kind of love that. Like pass it on, like be the caretaker for a little
Yeah,
while and then pass it on, let somebody else enjoy it.
I agree.
Actually, I recently tracked down the new owner of my van because I sold it back in 2017. Um, I tracked down the new owner, and he lives up in Washington. So it's funny. So the
What?
car came from Washington to Colorado, and then back to Washington.
What?
Um, and
I
it,
went to
it's
school
honest, like
over there
yeah,
and I didn't see any classic minis. What the?
really,
Well, actually, I went to
that's
school
funny.
in Idaho, but I lived in Washington at the time. But wow, what
Gotcha,
the?
gotcha.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
I like that.
And my old van's for kind of for sale, semi for sale. Like if anybody is looking for a sweet van project, I mean it still runs. Like the guy who has it says it still runs great. It's not the same 1275 that I had in there. I actually ended up swapping it out before I sold it, just because I kept the one that I built and put it in my next car. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
All right, I'm gonna be looking for it. I like that van. That one's cool.
yeah, man. No, it's cool.
Yeah, I hear you on the wanting to fund other projects and kind of move it on. And I wanted to do that when I got my S. I was like, let me just sell my current one and fund this project. And I was like, but it's my first mini. Like that was my, I waited so long because I got that when I was, I don't know, almost 30, I guess. So
Yeah.
I waited that long to get it. I was like, I can't get rid of it now. So I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah, no, for
All
sure.
the
I mean, there's always something special about the first one, right? Like,
Yeah,
I kind of wish I had the first one, even though it was a basket case. Like, I kind of wish
exactly.
I still had it, but
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. I keep making excuses like, well, it's not really special. It's a Rover Mini, but then I was like, but it's a Cooper, so it could
yeah,
be. But I've already, it doesn't look like it anymore anyway, so it doesn't really matter. All right, let's
yeah,
jump
no.
into the most current one. This is the one that piqued my interest. Were you looking for a race mini? Did you know this was a race mini when you were looking at it, or
I'm
tell
sorry,
me
I
a little
lost you
bit
there,
about
Mike.
how you found this one and what your goals were with it?
Oh yeah, man. Um, so this one, I kind of knew about this car for a long time. So I'm a member of the Minis of the Rockies club out in Denver.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there was a couple guys that raced minis out there, and I love racing. Like I raced karts for a while, and I always knew that I eventually wanted to get into like a race mini, like a vintage mini. Um, and so I'm gonna actually back up a little bit before this one
Sure.
because it's a little bit deeper story. So in 2017, I bought a 997 Cooper race car from a guy in the club, and the plan was I was gonna actually put the 1275 out of the van into this race car, this 997 Cooper race car, and just continue racing it with the RMVR race club. So Rocky Mountain Vintage Racing out of Denver.
Okay.
That was the plan. So I buy this car and I get it home and I drove it around the block. So it still ran. So I drove it around the block, pulled the motor out to start the motor swap with my other motor. And there's a few things I wanted to do, like I wanted to put in a different cage and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I start taking this car apart, and I start really realizing how rusty the shell really is. And every Mini, you expect some rust, but there was way more rust than I had seen in a Mini before. Like I had my shop light underneath the car, and I was doing some stuff like patching some stuff in the wheel wells in the rear. And
Yeah.
like when I got in the car, it just looked like the Milky Way. Like you could see all the stars shining through the
Yeah.
wheel well, and I was like, oh my gosh, okay, so there's some rust here. So it's to like just start picking away, like thinking like, oh, I'm gonna like just kind of patch here and like fix the rust as I go. And I just kept cutting away and kept cutting away. And at a certain point, I was sitting there and I was like, I have a roof left. Like that's all that I have left is a roof.
Is this
Like I don't have
the
any.
green mini with the British racing, or excuse me,
Yep,
the British flag on top?
yep, that's the one.
Okay.
Yeah, so I got to a certain point where I had a roof left, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I don't have any of like the suspension pickup points to measure to get this like body straight, like trying to weld this back together. So I ended up actually taking that out to boot to bonnet restoration out in California,
Mm-hmm.
where that shell's actually still out there.
I was gonna say I
Um,
feel like I've seen that shell before somewhere floating around, so maybe I've seen him post about it.
yeah, yeah, he's posted about it. And I mean, it's a fully rebuilt built shell now.
Yeah.
The tricky part was like once we got the shell rebuilt, like I started adding up the cost, and I'm like, I can't race this. Like, there's just too much money in this car. I can't race it. Um, so then I'm sitting there like, well, what do I do? So that project shifted from being a vintage race car into just like a full on like 997 Cooper restoration. So it's going to be like all original um, 997 Cooper. So we rebuilt a 997 motor. It's ready to drop in. Um, so then I'm sitting there like, okay, so now I have a 997 Cooper, but I still don't have a race car. And so then I just kind of started thinking like, what am I going to do? You're right. Like, um, thought about different options, and the blue car behind me, like it wasn't ever for sale, but Pete, the guy who previously owned it, he knew that I was into minis, and I'd always bugged him about his car. Like, when are you going to sell it to me? Um, and he kind of reached out to me and was like, "Hey, like, I unfortunately can't pass a medical, so I can't race anymore. I'd love to see it, continue racing, and I'd love for it to stay here in Colorado." And I I proposed this to my wife, and she's like, are you sure? Like, is this a good idea? You haven't finished your other car out in California." I was like, well, while I'm waiting for that one, I'll have another one I can work on. And like, I kind of was thinking about it, and I was like, man, I don't know if I can afford another race car because, like, I assumed it was going to be pretty pricey. Like, we never talked about price or anything like that.
Right.
And the wife's like, well, just talk to him, see what he says. So I was kind of talking with Pete, and I was like, well, how much do you want for this car? And he's like, well, I really wanted to stay in Colorado. He's like, how about $4,000? And I'm like, dude, like, that's a screaming deal for a race car. And I mean, it had a roll cage, it had,
Right.
everything that you pretty much needed to go racing. I was like, oh man, like, I'd love to, but even like right now, 4 grand, like, where I'm still working on a restoration, is a little bit much.
Yeah, yeah.
And so like, I kind of hemmed and hawed, and like a couple months went by, and it was actually kind of funny. Like, I watched another Mini sell on Bring a Trailer, that that red Mini from Pat Weber,
Yep.
another Colorado car, kind of coincidentally, and it sold for $32,000. And I told myself, I was like, "You're an idiot if you don't go buy this Mini for $4,000, because
Yeah.
you'll never get another
Yeah.
like race Mini for $4,000."
Yep.
So I called Pete, and I was like, "Are you still down for that price?" And he's like, "Yeah, that'll work." And so yeah, just went and got the deal done. Um, it's kind of funny though. So the title that he sold this to me with, it shows it as a 65
Mm-hmm.
Austin. And when I was initially looking at it, I was like, I know this isn't a 65. It doesn't have like the recessed windscreen or anything like that. Like, this is definitely an older car. And I was thinking maybe like a 60, 61, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I started digging in more into the details, and the way the floor is actually layered. This is a really early car. It's a 59, because it has the floor is actually below, like, underneath that toe board, the way it's
Wow.
layered.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a 59, and I even reached out to the 59 register and kind of ran it by them and showed them pictures, and they think it's probably like October, November of 59 is when this car was built.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Incredible.
So yeah, super cool. Like, to kind of dig that history. Um, and then I was actually looking in the like companion bins in the back, and there was some original paint still in there. And like, looking at that paint, it's Clipper blue. So looking on the 59 register, the only minis that had Clipper blue in 59 were the Morris. So I've kind of traced it back to being actually a Morris 850 instead of the Austin that he had sold it to me as.
Wow. Dude, that's super cool. I had no idea about any of that. Um, it's yeah, I mean, incredible. Like I've been in that situation where like a mini pops up or whatever it is, and it's like 4 grand. You immediately think like, damn, that's a great deal. Like if anyone else was like approaching that, you'd be like, oh, dude, go get it right now. But when it's yourself, I'm like, shut up. Like when I had my S was for sale, someone sent the link. I was like, it was like I think it was listed for 2 grand. And I was talking to my
Yeah.
wife. I was like, like that's a lot. Like in the grand scheme of things, it's not a lot. But like it's like I don't want to. I'm bad
Yeah.
at spending money. I was like 2 grand up front. That's a lot. And she's like, don't be an
Yeah.
idiot. And she went and lowballed the guy for me, so my offer sounded better. I was like,
That's funny.
but yeah,
No,
no,
no, I know. Like, thinking about it, like when I'm saying $4,000 for this car, like thinking about what you got your S for, it's like, well, shit. Like, this is expensive compared to your S. So
but now you think about it though, like you've traced it back to being a 59 Morse. Like there's not that many of those, right? Like that's probably up there with a Mark One S, right? Like those are few and far between. I would assume. I don't think there's that many of them.
yeah.
right?
No, for sure. They're pretty rare, especially here in the States, right? And this was
Yeah,
an export car, so this one was sold in, probably California or something originally. I know that this one does have race history in California as well. Um, so yeah, this was probably a California car, which I did a lot of research on like the actual correct name of the car, right? So in the UK, it would have been a 1959 Morris Mini Minor, but
hmm
in the States here, like early on, it would have actually been called a Morris 850. Like it didn't have anything about Mini or anything like that in the name for the
interesting.
export cars. Yeah. And so I actually did track down a Morris 850 badge, like an original Morris 850 badge for the back of it.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, yeah. So I haven't put it on yet because race car, you don't want it to weigh too much.
Every ounce matters, right? Every
Every
gram,
ounce,
right?
man. Yeah, dude, I was weighing lug nuts the other day, like to see which set of lug nuts were lighter. Like it's
You went down
it's
that
kind of a
rabbit hole
sickness.
hard. I
Yeah.
love it.
Oh man.
What did
Oh
it end
yeah.
up weighing? Did you weigh it? I forget.
Yeah. Yep. So with fuel, oil, water, everything, it's 1223 is the
Wow.
weight. Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome because it has a full cage, but it's pretty much gutted inside outside of that. Just one seat, no carpet or anything, right?
Yeah, no, exactly, exactly. So yeah, it does have like a full cage, inch and a half DOM 095 wall, like so proper, tubing for the roll cage. Um, and I have door bars, like everything. So I made it really safe, but like also trying to keep it as light as possible.
Yeah. Let's actually just get into that since
Yeah.
I'm sure everyone doesn't follow you, but describe your mini for you. And I know we said it's sitting behind him for it's this awesome. It's got a cool little livery, blue. It's some cool features to it. So why don't you jump into it and kind of describe what you've done to it or how it came to you, what you've done to it, the engine, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. And I actually love the blue of this car. Um, so the guy I bought it from, he already had the exterior painted this way, and he took it down to Mako and got like a $500 paint job on it, and just like picked out a random blue color, and like I absolutely love it. Like I thought about like repainting it because it's like super close to surf blue, but it's not quite.
Right.
Um, I ended up taking the door down to the local paint shop and had them scan it. And the color is actually a robin's egg blue from Chrysler. So it's kind of
Nice.
funny. I have a Chrysler color on my car. Um, but yeah, so essentially what I did when I got the car, like I knew that I wanted to like kind of revamp it and just kind of bring it up to modern spec, right? Because it was built probably in the 60s or 70s to race. So the roll cage I don't think was actually made out of tubing. I think it was made out of pipe. Um, so not really what you want for like your safety device there. And it was an inch and 3/8 pipe. And it was actually super heavy. I think that the old roll cage that I took out actually weighs about the same as the new roll cage that I put in. Um, but yeah, so that was kind of one of the first things I did. I cut out the old roll cage. Um, and it was kind of funny. I don't know who built this roll cage, but like when I cut it out, like I was looking on the backside of the welds where you couldn't see it. Like they didn't weld. Like they just didn't weld on the backside of those joints that you couldn't get to. So it's like super sketchy. Um, but yeah, so that was like kind of like the first thing I did, take that out. And I have a really good friend out here, Hank, who worked at a restoration shop for like for forever. And he lives like a mile away from me. So I actually pushed the car over to Hank's house, like pushed it, physically pushed it over to Hank's house. Um, and he has like a tubing bender and stuff like that. So we used his tubing bender, bent up this like I don't know. I'm pretty excited about the roll cage. It's pretty well done, I think. Um, all to kind of my own design that I just looked at other minis and just kind of cherry picked like ideas that I liked and kind of came up with my own cage.
Did you start stripping it right away and kind of bringing it up to date? Do what was like kind of your plan? It already had a race engine. Is that the one that you rebuilt or?
Yeah, so that was like the first thing. Like I got it home and just like started stripping it out, like taking the roll cage out. Um, the motor. Okay, so here's actually one of the other reasons why I ended up with this car. So in 20, I think it was 2015 or 2016, Pete was racing out at High Plains Raceway and had a Cooper S motor in there, like an original Cooper S, like number on the block and everything, and threw a rod through the side of that block and just like destroyed the motor.
Eek.
And yeah, so that's kind of actually when the car got parked, and he ended up buying a Cooper motor, like a 998 Cooper motor from our friend Jim Kennedy. Um, Funny story about that 998 Cooper motor is I owned that about 8 years ago and had it in the car that I'm sitting in. So if you're, I know you're probably listening and not looking, but like I'm actually sitting in half of a Mini right now.
Right.
And um, when I wrecked this car, I had that 998 Cooper motor in this car. And so just kind of like full circle here. Let's hope it has better juju this time
Is
while
that
we're
your
racing.
garage couch?
Yeah, it's my garage couch. Yeah, so
So cool.
technically I own two and a half minis, right? Since I've got
There you go.
the half couch here, but yeah,
Something like
so
that.
that's how Pete ended up with that 998 Cooper motor. He bought it. He was going to put it into the car, but he just never really got around to putting it into the car. Um, and I had actually talked to Pete about that motor, and I was like, "Hey, man, like I hit a pole at like 40 miles an hour with that motor. Like I would definitely take it apart and like check everything to make sure everything's still straight because I hit that pole pretty hard." And he's like, "Oh, I'm sure it's fine. I'm sure it's fine." And so then I ended up with the motor, right? And he still hadn't checked it out, and I'm like, "Oh man!" Like, so when I was going through the rebuild process, like I took the crank to like a machine shop and had them balance it and just make sure it was straight because I thought for sure I meant something when I hit that pole, but no, the motor was good. Um, it's a fairly stock 998 motor. It does have flat top pistons, so it doesn't have the original D tops, but it's got a 202 head, not the 295 head. So good compression. I did the calculations on it, and it's like a 10.9 to 1 compression ratio, so good compression. Um, I did get like a light and flywheel from like mini spares. I didn't go for a Swift tune. I'd love to someday, but you know, race cars are expensive to build, so
Yeah.
had to kind of go budget for now. Um, and yeah, so pretty good spec on the motor, and I actually just got it running, um, and took it to the local actually to the local kart track for like a little time trial day just to do a shakedown before I actually go to driver school. Car runs great, man. I'm super happy with it. It's got the Weber DCOE 40 carburetor. Um, yeah, so pretty good little spec motor.
Yeah, it was awesome. I loved super inspirational watching you build it and just being pretty meticulous with it, but like you said, you know, you weren't balling out on all the big bolt-on parts, but like you made a lot of parts too, or brackets and things like that for your car, which is super fun to watch. That's one thing that I, really want to try to get into is, I'm drawing a blank on what it's called, but I don't know, 3D, not 3D printing, but 3D design. Would you call it? I
Yeah,
don't know. Super. So how
yeah.
did you get into
No.
that?
So I don't know, back in like 2013, I was actually trying to start a company selling carbon, like flat pack carbon is kind of what I was calling it. Essentially, what I was doing was designing parts in CAD and then having them cut with like a CNC router. And I was making some just little like almost like trinkety stuff, right? Like
Right.
timing cover stuff, the bulkhead plates, like pretty much anything that's flat in a mini, like I was cutting it out of carbon and trying to make it light. Turns out though, like most people who own minis just want them to be original. So there's not like a huge market for like little carbon pieces. I mean, I sold some to like Belgium and like um, sent some to South Africa, but it just there wasn't like a huge market for it, so I
Mm-hmm.
didn't really do too much with it. But I actually still have some of those pieces, so I have some on my car. Um, so that's kind of like how it started, and then actually like when I started building this car, I had been watching Mike. from Stanceworks build that Ferrari,
Yeah.
and like he kept talking about like Fusion 360 and like Send Cut Send and all this stuff, where he was designing parts, sending it to Send Cut Send. They'd send him like a laser cut like CNC bent part back, and he could just like bolt it on. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And I had no experience designing in 3D. Like I had done like just like 2D designs previously. So I hadn't really done any like sheet metal stuff. So I just kind of like would Google like how to make a flange and stuff like this, and like all the different ways to like create this stuff in Fusion 360, and just kind of learned it that way, and just started making parts for the race car. It was super fun to kind of learn that process, and you get to be very accurate. Like I mean, I have the calipers out, just measuring like down to the thousandth of an inch, making sure that like everything's like super accurate.
Right.
Um, I think one of my favorite pieces, like one of the favorite pieces that I made was actually my switch panel. Um, like I bought the Swift switch panel, like the cool aluminum piece, and then it has the plastic box on top. Well, what I did is I like designed like my own insert that goes into that plastic box, and like I had to be like super accurate with like the measurements so that it would like fit in there and like look right. And then I actually did like a layered approach. So like the top layer has like the labels cut out for each switch, and then I have the bottom layer, and then I painted the top layer black and left the bottom layer that raw aluminum so it kind of pops. But yeah,
Right.
that was kind of one of my favorite pieces.
Yeah, no, I have really enjoyed because you made. Did you make the third brake light? You made like a engine bracket to like lift the engine out, in and out, and stuff like that. You've made a lot of really cool things that it's like I always see it. I'm like, damn, why didn't I think of that? Like, I want to start. Like, I keep like jotting down notes. I'm like, I need to like that. I would want to do this. I need to learn how to design this so I can make that because it's just like they're little cool things that it's kind of personalizes your car. Um, that's not necessarily for me at least not necessarily making it like it's like a new age period mod, right? Like it's
Yeah,
right. Like it's like if the
no, for
guys
sure.
back in the '60s building that race car had this technology, they would have done this instead of forget to weld the inside of the roll cage. You know what
Right? Yeah.
I mean?
No, for sure. I mean, and that's what kind of what I love is like everything on here is just kind of like a personal touch. And so I do want to mention though that third brake light is actually from Lumo Racing
Oh, okay,
in
that's
South
right.
Africa. They made um the mirror brackets and that third brake light,
Gotcha.
which Dan and Ray are super cool down there in South Africa.
Hmm.
Ray has like one of the cleanest minis I've ever seen. Like that thing is just amazing. So shout out to those guys, and they're actually the ones who designed my livery as well
Yeah,
with the custom like vintage numbers. So yeah, super stoked.
yeah. I
Those guys
wanted
are
to
awesome.
ask. Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because I know that you've worked with them on the livery, and I forgot that they did the light, but yeah, they're
Yeah,
super cool. I followed them for a while, and definitely somebody that I want to have on the podcast later on for sure.
yeah, no, for sure, man.
So how
But
did it
yeah,
feel
no,
shaking it down?
oh, it feels so good. I took it out, um, did like 6 sessions in the car, and unfortunately there is an oil leak, so I've already pulled the motor back apart.
Dun dun
Um,
dun.
right, man. I bet, like, I don't want to like kind of talk shit about the parts suppliers, but modern mini parts are kind of shit right now. Like, I I have a brake caliper that I bought from one of the reputable part suppliers. Got it, and I tried bleeding the brakes and couldn't. Like, I just couldn't. I couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong. I had my buddy Hank over, and like we were trying to bleed the brakes for like 30 minutes and couldn't figure out what we were doing wrong. I actually pulled the caliper apart, and the banjo bolt that screws into the top like threaded hole there, like next to the bleed nipple.
Yeah.
Like when you thread that in, it actually blocks the oil galleys, like the fluid galleys. So the caliper isn't actually communicating to the bleed nipple, and it's not communicating to the other half of the caliper.
Wha-
And like I couldn't believe this, right? Because like you buy a brand new caliper, you think you're going to get a part that you can just throw on,
Yeah.
right? And so like finding this issue, and they haven't been super easy to deal with. So I like told them like right away what was going on. They're like, hey, sorry, you're having to deal with a shitty part. We'll send you another one. So they sent me another one. The next one shows up, same exact problem. I'm like, dude, you guys have a bad batch or something. And they're like,
Oh.
well, you're the first person to say anything. I'm like, so I'm like the unluckiest like mini owner. I've gotten two bad calipers and everybody else is fine. So I don't know. Just kind of a
Wow.
bummer. And then like the week before that shakedown like time trial event, I still hadn't started the motor yet, right? So like I take the spark plugs out and I'm cranking it over to get oil pressure, and I had done the normal grease in the oil pump to prime it when I did the rebuild, and I'm sitting there and like nothing. I couldn't get oil pressure. So I pull the banjo bolt, put oil in from the top, put it in, fourth gear and roll it backwards just a little bit. And I can see the pumps working. And so it kind of sucks it back in. So I put a little more oil in, just kind of really do everything I can to prime this oil pump,
Right.
put it all back together, still nothing. I could not get oil pressure. So like again, a week before this event that I'm trying to make it to, and I'm pulling the motor back out, have to split the motor apart and get to the center oil pickup, and the flange where they had actually brazed the center oil pickup to the flange, there was a pinhole. So it was sucking air and it wouldn't catch a prime. So
Oh my
again, Hank
gosh.
Hank to the rescue. Hank comes over with his equipment and we brazed up that pinhole, and I slapped the motor back together, and within 10 seconds it had oil pressure. Like
Wow.
so
Brand
it's
new oil pickup too.
brand new oil pickup, and it's just kind of like a bummer to kind of like get let down. And then the oil leak. So back to the oil leak that I found after the um the time trial event. So that half moon seal on the timing cover end that goes between
Yeah.
the block and the gearbox.
Yeah.
So I put the higher performance, like the rated one, that's like the semi rigid one,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? I put that in there, and when I dropped the gearbox onto the motor, I didn't realize that little half moon seal was just a little bit short. So it's got a gap. And when the
Ooh.
motor's running, it pours oil out that. So I had a pretty good oil leak. Um, so yeah, that was this week. I was actually pulling the motor back apart
Shit.
to
I always thought
to
that
fix
like
that.
rigid one, like I can't like in my head I can't picture it being better because it like I feel like the little bit softer one, malleable, can get squished in there better.
Yeah,
You know
I
what I
think
mean?
from now on I'm gonna stick with that softer one. So
Yeah, I was super nervous when I was putting that in on my engine. I was like, this is gonna leak. This is I just put I think I forget where I read it, but I put like just a little bit of RVT on it just so it would like kind of stick in place, and I was like making sure. And damn,
no,
actually,
that's yeah.
my engine didn't leak at all. Well, I lied. Right when I put fluids in it, immediately the head was leaking like water out everywhere. I was like, what the fuck? I don't know. I don't know if it was the head studs or
Yeah,
the bad gasket or what, but yeah, it was that was. But anyway, no oil leaks, so I was very
yeah.
surprised.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, moral to the story for everyone listening: don't trust new parts. Inspect everything very thoroughly.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, oh my gosh.
It's yeah, it's crazy. Especially
I mean, I am thankful that we do have so many suppliers out there that we can still get parts.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Because think about all those other cars, like vintage cars, who struggle to get any kind of parts. So we are lucky, right, that we have
Yeah.
them. I just wish sometimes the parts were better quality. But then,
Yeah.
but then I also don't want to pay more. So like it's that double-edged sword. I don't know. I just have to.
Yeah. Yeah, there's majority like if I can rebuild original calipers, I'll probably do that, but like there's it's so easy to just buy new, and majority of it's pretty affordable. Like
Yeah,
you can get a whole brand new like high-low suspension and arms and everything for a couple $100. But yeah, there's certain things that are definitely inspect. The one thing that really bothers me with new parts is like the rubber bits. Like just none
Yeah.
of them work at all.
No.
They just like
No,
they're
for sure.
done before you even get the car back on the road. It's crazy.
No, it is. It is frustrating. I mean, we are super lucky with all the parts coming out of Japan now as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Like I just actually upgraded to those maintenance-free ball joints and super stoked with those. They're super expensive, right? Like it's hard to like justify the additional cost, but then you get them
Yeah.
and you're like, oh no, this
Yeah.
part's worth it. Like this is
For
this is
sure.
worth it.
I think they're starting to make better quality like dust boots and things like that as well. But yeah, I want to get I think his name's David, right, from Classic Mini
Yeah.
Japan. I want to get him on and hopefully maybe one day and talk about that kind of stuff too. Because man, I love that's a huge list of mine. Is I never was really into like Japanese cars per se. Like I wasn't like a JDM fanboy, but as I like grew up and I realized like their car culture and attention to detail on things is just second to none. And it's incredible to see, at least their mini scene and all their other car culture is fantastic. I love it.
No, for sure. I was actually down in Austin, Texas for work out at
Mhm.
Circuit of the Americas, and a guy showed up with a classic mini, and he's from Japan. Like, so the guy's from Japan, like super cool guy, and like all the little details were all. I mean, that mini looks exactly like every mini, or like all the minis from Japan. Like all the cool little like mods that they make, like the vertical windshield wipers and stuff like that, and like all the
Yeah.
cool little details that they do.
Right.
And so it was cool to see that mini here in the States. And he actually took me for a ride around Circuit of the Americas in that car. It's super cool.
Dang, that's cool. Yeah, um, their their like attention to detail on that kind of stuff is fantastic.
No,
I
it
wanted
is.
to ask you. I don't know if I misunderstood, but do you still have that other one, the other green mini that was in? Is it still yours, or you sold it to them now? The one that you sent to California.
No, it's still mine. Um,
So you said it's still being
it's
worked on in the back scene. Okay, so
yeah,
interesting.
yeah, no, it's. I mean, it's just one of those things. It's at the restoration shop. It's kind of waiting its turn for the paint booth. Um, it's kind of dangerous though, because like just this morning I was thinking, maybe I should just turn that into a vintage race car. So I need
Did
Nick to
did
like
you
just
listen to
paint it. So I,
Don's interview?
yeah, I did. Yeah,
He's just, I don't know his exact verbiage, but it's only money. It can be fixed.
dude, I know, right? Well, and like
I feel
it's
you though.
funny.
I feel
So one of the next projects on the race car here, the wife really wants me to build a set of seat brackets that will work for her. So I'm kind of thinking she's probably going to end up taking over this race car, and so then I'll need my own race car. So I'll have to build the other one.
awesome.
Yeah, she's
The
she's quick too. So like we used to race karts, and like I couldn't keep up with her.
Really?
She's a really good driver. So
Does she have a project race car or no? That's why
no,
yours is gonna turn
no,
into it.
yeah,
Oh dang, that's fun. That'd be super cool. That's what I always say is once I get mine kind of both running, I like one of his and hers, but I don't have any racing to do here. Although I just saw a couple weekends ago, County Fairgrounds, I think, was holding a autocross. Although I think it
oh
got
nice.
canceled because of the rain, but hopefully that's a little more regular. I'll jump over on and jump into that. The
No,
last
that'd be
thing I
cool. I
wanted to
know. Like,
go. Sorry.
no, I was just gonna say, I like you definitely need to do some racing with that Cooper S. Like, keep that history going, man. We got
Yeah,
to write the next chapter for these cars.
yeah, definitely, definitely. I actually l- kind of an update. It's like once every year. I keep texting the guy I got it from, who really didn't know anything, but I was like, man, is there any way you could find out the history of this car? And he was like, oh yeah, yeah. Let me just ask my buddy. It was his grandpa's. And I was like, all right, cool, cool. Like, I'd really appreciate that. And like, of course, I knew he wasn't going to text me back. So like a couple weeks later, I texted him crickets. So I'll keep hitting him up. He'll eventually I'll
Nice.
get the story. Just like, dude, just
No,
give me
that's
the guy's
awesome.
number. I'll ask him. The one thing I wanted to ask you, I don't think I've ever asked you before. The headlights in your race mini, they're like mesh. Does that actually pump fresh air into the engine bay, or is that just kind of cool for looks?
I mean, technically, yeah, it's letting more air into the engine bay. I thought about like doing some ducting to like maybe cool my brakes or like feed that Weber like some really fresh air. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Vintage racing, like the regulations are kind of depending on which club you race with, like you have to
Hmm.
be really careful. And I want this car to be able to race with all the different clubs, whether it be SVRA, CVAR, HSR. So I every time I make a change, I go through and look at everybody's rule book and just make sure that it's gonna work.
Right.
So that's something that I still need to research and just make sure that would be legal. With RMVR, the club I'm going to race with, they wouldn't have a problem with it. But again, just kind of want to keep it legal across the board.
Fun. Fun. Is there a dyno or something around your area that you can get it dyno tuned or well, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So I went to the race shop here. He mostly deals with like people with like Porsche race cars
Hmm.
and Formula cars and stuff like that. And he's been super helpful. He actually mounted the tires for me,
Okay.
the new Hoosiers.
Yeah.
And I went in there and I was talking to him and I was like, "Hey, do you know anybody with a dyno around?" He's like, "Well, I've got a dyno." I was like, "Oh, sweet!" Like, because I'd really like to tune my Weber on the dyno. He's like, "You don't need to tune your Weber on the dyno." He's like, "Just whatever the car's telling you, just do that." Like, I was like, "Huh?" Like, because everybody else is like, "No, you need to put the car on a dyno to get the best out of it."
Right.
And yeah, old school Porsche guys like, "No, you don't need a dyno."
He's
Like,
like, just
let
put
me
a
tell you what to do.
screwdriver to it and listen through the screwdriver, the smell
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah. No, so and, I mean it was super cool. Like he gave me all these like little tips on how to tune a Weber just by feel, like what the
Right.
car is doing. And like I took the car out to that little time trial shakedown event and just through what he kind of had taught me, like I got the car running like not perfect. There's still a few things I need to kind of work out, but like the carbs are running great.
Super cool. Yeah, I haven't really researched Webers too much, but when I got my SUs rebuilt and stuff like that, I was kind of like dug into it a little bit, and it's really interesting because you could get it dialed in pretty good with just drive it, take it around the block, rip it. How's it driving at low RPM versus high RPM? What are I know a lot of people say don't look at the spark plugs anymore with the modern gas or whatever, but it's still, you could totally tell if
Yeah.
it's rich or lean and if you hear some pops or whatever it is. But yeah, that's fun. I like kind of messing with that and kind of feeling the butt dyno.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean honestly the Weber compared to an SU, I love the Weber. Like it just makes more sense in my brain. Like,
Yeah.
oh, like when you're at like, full throttle, it's doing this, you change the main circuit or the air corrector. Like with the SU, it's like, well, like if you change the needle, it changes like the whole thing, right? Like so
Right.
it's I don't know. The Weber makes sense in my brain. I
Yeah.
like it.
Yeah, it does. It's like the SU is a little more simple, whereas like, all right, you just got to look at the graph of the needles or profile it yourself. But
Yeah.
yeah, it would be a little bit easier if it's like, all right, I need to change the main jet versus with a, I don't even know anything about it, but you know what I mean. There's more aspects to it that you can kind of mess with without messing with the other one
No, for
for
sure.
sure.
Like my buddy Brian, like he goes down these rabbit holes. Like he is like so smart with this stuff. And like he's like with his SU, he was tuning it and he's like, "Yeah, I'm like massaging it in this range here to get this RPM to run better." And I'm just like, "Dude, like that is so much work. Like so much work." And he's got all these like graphs off of mini land and stuff like that where he's like figuring out exactly which needle he needs
Yeah.
and stuff. And it's funny because he recently just started digging into the distributors, and like now he's tuning his own distributor, like correcting the weights and stuff like that, and the spring tensions to get the right distributor curve for the
Wow.
for the advanced curve. And I'm like, dude, like
Yeah,
And he's yeah,
that's rough.
yeah,
I
and he's
went
doing
down the
this on an
graph rabbit
850.
hole.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
So it's like,
squeaking
and
out
it's funny.
like a
Well,
quarter
because
of a
he's got a
horsepower.
1270, yeah, he's got a 1275 that's like rebuilt, ready to go in the car, and he's like, "Well, I just want the 850 to run right first." And I'm like, "Dude, like that is amazing. Like I love the dedication to like getting that thing tuned perfectly to
Yeah,
then swap it out for a 1275."
that's funny. That's fun. It's fun though. Like we've all been there with something, but
Oh,
yes.
for sure. Whatever you want to nerd out on, like, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes it gets a little like with the distributor. It's like, "Oh, I'll just get an electronic one that does it itself."
dude, right now, for sure. I'm running the Alden Red, like the race distributor in the race car, non-vacuum advance, and my buddy's like, you could probably get more power if you were doing this with your distributor, and I'm like, man, like I'm just leaving the Alden Red in there, like we'll see what happens. So
I've always wanted to try out one of those that has like the different maps on it or whatever for the
yeah,
different advances. Those seem kind of cool.
yeah, those CSIs and the
Is
one
that
two
what it
threes
is?
and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
there's a couple different companies that make them. Yeah, man, I've heard really good things, from those. There's on the Mark One forum, there's a big discussion going on about distributors right now, and that keeps coming up whether or not you should do electronic or points or, the
Right.
maps, the different maps and stuff. So yeah, it's always fun.
Fun. Cole, you ready for the Patty probe?
Oh man, I am ready.
Let's go. Alrighty. First question. What's your favorite mini variant?
Oh man. Um, so I think I've owned just about every mini variant. The only one I really haven't is the Moke or like a Wasley.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I always thought that the mini pickup was my favorite variant, until I owned one, and I'm 6'2", and I owned it for about 6 months. I brought that one in from Canada, ended up selling it, because I just didn't fit. Like everything I did, like I tried setting my seat as low as possible. I tried aftermarket seats, tried everything, and just like could not get comfortable in that. So I'm gonna say the two-door saloon, man, the little race car.
Good answer. Good answer. Yeah, the pickup I think is the only one that's very difficult to fit in, and I'm like
Yeah,
5'7" on a good day, and I sat in my buddy Ricky's and I obviously fit, but I could like there's no more room to go back.
yeah, yeah.
You're
No,
yeah. So
exactly.
if you're any taller than that, if you're 5'8" and up, you're pushing it.
Yep.
I think you answered basically this in our conversation, but you've had like seven minis, and you currently have two and a half, I guess, because you're sitting in one.
Yes, two and a half. Yeah.
Let's see here: A series, Honda swap, or other.
I mean, that's a simple one for me. It's definitely always going to be an A series.
I think I need to change
Sacrilege to put
this.
anything else.
Oh, there we go. I think I need to change this one for the ones that I know are obviously A series fanboys like me to like 850, 998, 997, 1275. Like what
Oh no, for sure,
you've
for
had
sure.
a bunch of different ones. Which engine has been your favorite?
998, hands down. Like I love it because it's got that like really square like bore to stroke ratio, so you can
Mm-hmm.
just rev them like crazy. 1275s are good. You get that little extra power, but I just like love how you can rev a 998.
Yeah, I've heard such good things about 998s, and still up in the air. Of I have a spare engine in my garage, and it's still up in the air if it's a 998 or a 1098. So I got to kind of crack her open and figure it out. But it's on the list to build a little cool race engine one of these days.
Yeah, yeah. No, they're awesome, man.
What has been your favorite mini modification or one that you want to incorporate?
Oh man. Um, well, for me, I think the most satisfaction I've gotten from like a single project was building a roll cage, like bespoke from the ground up, welded in. Like I think that was the most fun thing that I've done.
Yeah, that's incredible, man. That takes a lot of hard work, talent, dedication to kind of get that going. I mean, in
Oh yeah,
theory, it's like, all right, I'm just gonna, kind of fit some pipes in there, but the bends and making sure it's like nice and tight and
yeah.
properly. Is it? Did you weld it all the way in, or is it like a bolt in?
No, it's welded in, and it's crazy the amount of math that goes into getting the angles and
Yeah.
like getting this stuff all like correct. And it's kind of crazy. So when you look at the regulations for like roll cages, there's so many specific regulations. Like that back brace off of the main hoop, it has to be 30 degrees or more from the main hoop. So when you look at a mini, it's like, oh well, that's easy. You just do 30 degrees, no problem. With this car though, I needed the seat to be so far back because I'm so tall that it then puts the main hoop really close to that back bulkhead. And
Oh.
then the other part of that regulation is the top of that rear brace has to be within 6 inches of the top of the roll bar. So now getting within 6 inches of the top of the roll bar and also 30 degrees without going through that bulkhead is so tough. Like it's right at 30 degrees. Like if you measure it just a little bit off, it might be 29 and a half, but it's like right at 30 degrees. Like so yeah, that was a lot of fun just kind of figuring that stuff out and following all the different rule books, making sure that like it was going to be, to spec and pass tech.
Yeah, that's super cool. That's something after, talking with you, something that even though may or may not race the S, but build it based off of a race specs, because it's kind of fun to follow that rule book and make it within standard kind of specs like that instead of just willy nilly throwing in a cage or something like that.
Yeah, no, no, for sure. It's fun. Like it's fun. Like the research that goes into it is fun. Just making sure you're kind of following everything. I think the next race car, if I build another one, would be an Appendix K, like following like their rules. Not that I'd ever like take it over to Europe to race, but I just like think like how in depth they are with their rules is pretty cool. Like the
Yeah.
fact that you can't run high lows, you have to run aluminum trumpets. So like what they do is they set their ride height with a high low, pull that high-low out, and then cut the trumpet down to match the high-low. So then you have the same ride height, but it's not adjustable.
Yeah. That's kind of
So
cool
just
actually to think, high lows are so easy to kind of mess around with, but if you already set the ride height and then you pull out and machine down the trumpet, like it's
yeah,
your ride height's golden. It's not
yeah.
gonna, huh?
Until you buy new donuts, and
Oh,
then
well, that's
then you're
true.
sitting like a monster truck again.
That's true.
Yeah,
Or you just you set it with brand new donuts, and so it's only going down from there. What's your favorite wheel?
oh man. I think the ones that are on the race car right now are probably like one of my all-time favorites. There, it's a Compomotive VF, 10 by 5 wheel. It's gold. Super rare. I actually reached out to Compomotive because they're still around. I was like, "Hey man, like any plans to ever remake these?" And the guy's like, "Nope, those molds are, those are long gone. We're never gonna make those again. Take care of those because those are super rare." And I'm like, "Yeah,
Wow. Yeah, I'm
yeah,
racing them. No,
yeah, I know."
I'm just kidding.
Um, so yeah, but no, those are kind of one of my favorites. Like second place would definitely have to be Steely's. Like I love the look of Steely's.
Yeah.
If they made like a 10 by 5 like alloy Steely, I think I'd probably be running it
Do
on the
they
race
not?
car. But they make the 4.5 Steely's. John Brown, I think they started making like I think it might even be like a 6 by 10 Steely, but it's like really wide offset.
Yeah.
And I don't think it look. I think it's kind of similar to like a 918, where
Mm-hmm.
it's got that
Mm-hmm.
really wide offset. But
Yeah. Yeah, because I think like mini spares or something makes a alloy one, but it's 4.5 inch.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Which I've run those on like lots of my minis in the past, and I love it because it gives you that steely look, but also like lightweight, and
Yeah. No, I
it's
like
good.
those a lot. Yeah, Steelies are always cool. I remember, growing up, I was always like, it had to be a cool wheel. And then, once you kind of get into vintage cars, you're like, why the hell did the Steelies just look so good on on these cars? I don't know. I
I
can't.
know.
It doesn't make sense, but they do.
Oh yeah.
So far, what has been the most pain in the ass job you've done on your Mini?
Okay, so I've been a faithful listener every episode I've listened to, right? And every time like you come to this question, in my head I always come up with like, oh, what's the worst job? Every week it changes because every week I go through another pain in the ass job and I'm like, nope, that's the worst.
Yeah.
I think some of the recent like most pain in the ass jobs. Um, Installing the U joints, drive axle to the gearbox. I think that's one of the worst. Painting a roll cage is
Ooh,
probably one of the worst. Like trying to get behind every bar is just like such a pain in the ass.
yeah.
Um, oh man, yeah. There's so many pain in the ass jobs. There really are.
There really is a ton. It's like they're all so easy, but because it's so many that it just makes it so difficult.
No, for sure. I mean, I'm super lucky with this race car because it does have that flip front. So like
Yeah,
I flip the front, slide it off its little hinges, and I can like pull the motor out. It like I can have the motor out in like less than an hour. It's super easy.
right.
Um, that does make things easier, but I think that I just need I don't know. I just want to switch up the drive shafts. I want to get rid of those Q5000s or whatever they're called, QH. Um, you know what I'm talking about. The U
The
joints.
the U joint ones, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
What go to pot joint or like a Hardy Spicer?
I would definitely go to Hardy Spicer if I can find the parts, which I think Swiftune
I was just gonna
makes.
say Swifttune
Yeah, I
just
think
made
Swiftune
like a
makes them, but they're always out of stock and they're quite expensive.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Actually,
There's all these little things that I want to upgrade. But
I think you can buy the repo production ones from like mini spares and stuff like that. I think they
oh, nice.
have
I'll have to look.
the
Yeah,
inner joint. I think I don't know what like
yeah,
actually entails like with the splines for the diff and all that kind of stuff.
yeah. I'd have to switch that up because I think the output shafts are different, and I think
Yeah,
the output covers are different as well because the size difference. Because I know
probably.
I remember when I was reaming the output bushings for my gearbox. Like there's the different size bushings and there's a different size for the Hardy Spicers. So pretty
Yeah,
sure that is different. But I think that's such a worthwhile upgrade, man.
yeah, yeah. Those are pretty beefy. If you could have a drink, coffee, beer, tea with one mini celeb, who would it be?
Oh, man, there's been some good ones, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna have
This
to
is
go
a
with
hard
Pat
question.
Moss. Yeah, I'm going with Pat Moss. I think she'd be awesome to have a gin and tonic with and just talk like old school rally.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
You guys come up with some good answers, man. I need to like think of my own, and maybe I'll patty probe myself one day.
Yeah, man.
Let's see. I added a couple new ones the last couple episodes here. What is your favorite mini color?
Oh, there's so many good ones.
Yeah.
Um, So the Cooper that I have out in California, we're going to be painting that almond green. I
Ooh.
absolutely love almond green. It's definitely like high up on the list. I think that surf blue is probably my favorite mini color though. Like
Yeah.
I've never owned a surf blue mini, but it's just like it just looks 60s. You know what I mean?
It
Like it just
does.
looks right on a Mark One, um, especially like a Mark One Cooper with the white roof. Just looks
Yeah.
good.
Have you ever seen Fiesta Yellow in person?
I've never seen one in person.
Oh,
No.
dude, I saw one and I was like, "What is this color?" It's so cool in person. It's
Yeah.
it. I mean, I don't know if it was a respray for his original and it was faded or whatever, but it was like such a weird limey yellow, but so soft and like unlike any other color I've ever seen. Dude, that's one of my
And you
top
don't
ones.
see it. You don't see it often. Like
No.
I was at East Meets West back in 2019, and there's so many red, like tartan
Yeah.
red everywhere.
Right.
Um, I don't think there was a single almond green, and I don't remember a Fiesta yellow. And
No.
like that's like one of the bigger mini meets, right? And like if they don't show up there, like where do
Yeah.
they show up? So
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know.
it's a cool color in person for sure. Almond green is definitely a fantastic color. Um, surf blue, all those. Yeah, there's so many cool ones. It's hard, but I think it's like it's got to be on the right car too. It like
Yeah,
you know, it's interesting. All right, man. I appreciate you being on. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I'm sure I'll be able to splice that together.
nice.
Where can the people find you if they want to follow this race car build?
Yeah. No, so I mean, pretty much just on Instagram is kind of the only social media I do. You can search for me, c.liggett. Liggett like the cigarettes, if you're wondering how to spell that. So,
Nice. For all you non-smokers out there, I will link it in the description.
Yeah,
uh,
no, I really appreciate you having me on. I appreciate just that you're doing these podcasts. It's cool to learn about all these different people out there with their minis and their stories and yeah, no, it's been fun kind of listening along with you.
yeah, no, it's been fun. It's hard to schedule, with all the different time zones and stuff like that. But it's super fun, super interesting. It's like hearing your story, how you found your minis. It's just that alone to me is always fun.
No,
So
for sure, man.
I appreciate you being on.